For ages, the Comanche people dwelled in the northern Rockies as a struggling branch of the Shoshone tribe. They endured mistreatment from neighboring tribes and were pushed off their lands, forced to live like peasants. Then, everything changed when they encountered horses. They transformed from underdogs into perhaps the world's top light cavalry force in a short time. They flipped the script on their tormentors, dominating the very tribes that once bullied them. In this video, we will closely examine the 5 most brutal battles in Comanche history. Kindly like and subscribe for more videos. On March 19, 1840, an interesting turn of events occurred in San Antonio, Texas, as a delegation of 33 Penateca Comanche leaders, accompanied by 32 Comanche individuals, including men, women, and children, gathered for peace talks at the council house. The Penateca Comanche, an important group among the Comanche tribes, had a history of clashes with white settlers in Texas. However, several factors pushed them to seek peace with the Texans at this time. Firstly, the Comanche faced increasing pressure from other indigenous groups, such as the Cheyenne and Arapaho, who were encroaching on their traditional territories along the northern frontier. These external threats made them consider having a potential alliance with the Texans to strengthen their position. Additionally, the Comanche had endured serious losses due to outbreaks of smallpox, which further weakened their ability to resist outside pressures. Furthermore, the daring pursuit and successes of the Texas Rangers, a formidable force known for their rifts with Native American tribes, added to the Comanche's desire for reconciliation. In light of these challenges, the Penateca Comanche leadership made the bold decision to initiate peace talks with the Texans. Their aim was to negotiate a mutually beneficial agreement that would bring an end to hostilities and secure their interests in the face of threats. Despite hopes for a resolution, the peace talks at the council house took a dramatic turn when Texas officials discovered that the Comanche had not brought all the captives as demanded. Instead, they presented only a few prisoners, among them the deeply traumatized Matilda Lockhart, who recounted her horrific experiences while in captivity. As part of their plan, the Comanche tribe deliberately presented only 2 captives to the Texans. One was a Mexican boy of little importance to the Texans, while the other was 16-year-old Matilda Lockhart, who had been abducted along with her 3-year-old sister in 1838. However, the decision to release Matilda Lockhart turned out to be a grave mistake. Matilda had endured unspeakable horrors during her captivity, and her condition shocked the Texans in San Antonio. As described by Mary Maverick, a resident of the town, Matilda's appearance transformed the day into what she called a day of horrors. Matilda's condition was shocking. Her head, arms, and face were covered in bruises and sores, and her nose had been burned down to the bone, leaving her nostrils wide open and raw. As the women tended to her, Matilda couldn't help but break down in tears, feeling utterly humiliated and degraded by her ordeal. Matilda bravely recounted the horrors she had endured. Along with enduring sexual abuse, she had been subjected to cruel torture by the women in the Comanche camp. They had held torches to her face, causing her to scream in agony, leaving her entire body scarred from the flames. Despite her suffering, Matilda smartly managed to learn the Comanche language and even overheard the tribe discussing their plans. In a desperate plea, Matilda revealed that there were around 15 more white captives in the Comanche camp she had come from. However, she begged to be kept hidden, fearing that she could be killed. As the council gathered in the simple limestone building known as the Council House in San Antonio, everyone could feel the rising tension. The Comanche war chiefs, adorned in ceremonial attire, exchanged pleasantries with Texan officials inside, while outside, Comanche women waited patiently, and young boys played games in the dusty streets. Curious spectators, both Anglo settlers and local Mexicans. In the middle of all these, the Texas officials were brewing with anger. The mistreatment of Matilda Lockhart shocked them to their core. While accustomed to interactions with Native American tribes, the savagery displayed by the Plains Indians, including abduction and torture of white women, was deeply unsettling. The scene was tense as tribal chiefs sat on the packed earth, their hands fondling prized weapons while they eyed the white commissioners coldly. Texan delegates wasted no time demanding the return of more captives. Muk-war-Roo, the Comanche spokesperson, skillfully dodged, admitting other captives were held by Comanche bands beyond his control. But his claim was only partially true. Many captives were taken by bands other than his own. Muk-war-Roo confidently proposed ransoming all captives, oblivious to Texan claims. He laid out his terms: goods, ammunition, blankets, and vermilion, believing his argument was rock solid. With a calm demeanor, he asked for their opinion. The Texans' response was swift and firm. Soldiers entered the council house, positioning themselves around the room as the chiefs grew restless. Colonel Koch made it clear the chiefs would be detained until all white prisoners were returned. Negotiation was off the table until then. The interpreter, a former Comanche captive, hesitated, fearing the chief's reaction. But eventually, he relayed the Texan demand before making a quick exit. Before the chiefs could recover from what they heard, the Comanche chiefs exploded into war cries. Chaos erupted, and shots rang out. Muk-war-Roo fell, stabbed by a ranger captain before being shot dead. Amidst the frenzy, Ranger Caldwell, unarmed but resourceful, seized a musket, dispatching a Comanche chief before resorting to using the musket as a club. As the council house echoed with gunfire and screams, confusion reigned. Some chiefs attempted to flee, inciting fury among the Comanche women and children, who turned on the bystanders. Soldiers, previously lurking in the background, opened fire, causing casualties among both Indians and fleeing spectators. The massacre resulted in the deaths of 33 chiefs, women, and children. Another 32, mostly women and children, some of whom were wounded, were captured and imprisoned. Among the casualties were 7 white individuals, including an army officer and the sheriff of San Antonio. 10 others were badly injured, and many more, including officials and bystanders, suffered minor wounds. Following the tragedy, the only surgeon in San Antonio, who was originally from Germany, worked tirelessly throughout the night to care for the injured white victims, amidst the shock and devastation felt by the community. The next morning, as San Antonio was still reeling from shock and filled with rumors, most people remained indoors behind locked doors. The commissioners selected one woman, the wife of a prominent deceased chief, from the jail and placed her on a horse. She was given provisions and instructed to find her people's camps. Her mission was to convey a message that unless the Comanche bands released the white captives mentioned by the Lockhart girl, the survivors of the council house fight would be executed. With the sun marking the passage of time, she had 12 days to deliver this ultimatum to the Comanche nation. The chief's widow arrived at the large Comanche camp, situated many miles away from San Antonio, crying out in grief and sorrow. Despite her mourning, she managed to convey the tragic fate of the delegation to everyone in the camp. The news threw the Comanches into a state of extreme confusion and despair. The losses, which included the prisoners held in San Antonio, were devastating by Comanche standards. Nearly all of the greatest chiefs of the Penataku Band had perished, a loss from which the southern Comanches never fully recovered. Throughout the night, the women, wives, daughters, and mothers, engaged in mourning rituals, crying out and inflicting wounds upon themselves in their anguish. The men, wrapped in their robes, rocked back and forth, moaning in grief as they cut off their sacred hair. As grief turned to rage against the Texans, vengeance was unleashed upon the helpless captives in the camp. They were subjected to torture and brutalization. Each child and young woman was stripped naked and pinned beside the campfire. They were mutilated and then burned alive by vengeful women who sought to extract every last ounce of agony from their suffering bodies. Among the victims was Matilda Lockhart's 6-year-old sister, who perished screaming under the moonlit sky of the high plains. However, Texian militias fought back, leading to the Battle of Plum Creek in August 1840. This battle, which was the aftermath of the Council House fight, was nothing short of brutal. Chief Buffalo Hump, a respected leader among the Comanche, led a devastating raiding party of up to 600 warriors, unleashing chaos along the Texas frontier. They burned settlements, attacked pioneers, and stole horses, leaving a trail of destruction in their path. One of their most audacious attacks was on Linville in Calhoun County, where they pillaged and terrorized the town's inhabitants. In response, the Texas Volunteer Army and the legendary Texas Rangers mobilized to stop the Comanche rampage. They pursued the raiding party relentlessly until they cornered them at Plum Creek near present-day Lockhart, Texas, on August 11, 1840. The battle that ensued was fierce and dramatic, with gunfire echoing through the rugged terrain. Despite being outnumbered, the settlers and their allies fought with courage and determination, ultimately driving back the Comanche attackers. Chief Buffalo Hump and his warriors suffered heavy losses and were forced to retreat. As the Comanche attempted to retreat to the plains of northern Texas with so much plunder, including a substantial herd of horses and mules along with numerous firearms, they were met with fierce resistance from the Texan forces. The Texas Volunteers, supported by Texas Rangers and armed settlers who swiftly joined their ranks, engaged the Comanche in a relentless pursuit that stretched over 2 days. The ensuing gunfight was characterized by intense skirmishes as both sides maneuvered across the rugged terrain of central Texas. Despite the overwhelming numerical advantage of the Comanche, the Texans demonstrated remarkable courage and tactical prowess, inflicting serious casualties on their adversaries. Over 80 Comanche warriors fell in battle, while a considerable number were captured, among them women and children who had accompanied the raiding party. The Texan losses were quite small, with only 1 man killed in action and 7 others sustaining wounds during the prolonged engagement. However, despite their valiant efforts, the Texans were unable to prevent the Comanche from escaping with the bulk of their plunder, including the prized horses and mules that were vital to their nomadic way of life. Ultimately, while the Texans emerged victorious in terms of casualties inflicted, the Comanche succeeded in preserving their mobility and retaining control over their valuable spoils. The establishment of Mission Santa Cruz de San Saba in 1757 was a new chapter in the efforts of Franciscan missionaries to Christianize the Apache Indians in Texas. The mission was situated on the San Saba River, approximately 3 miles east of the present-day town of Menard, Texas. This location was chosen strategically, being close to the ruins of San Luis de las Amarillas Presidio, which was built to protect the mission. The mission's establishment was preceded by years of advocacy by Franciscans based in San Antonio, who sought to establish a mission for the Apache people to solve the ongoing conflicts between the Apache tribes and Spanish settlers. These conflicts have persisted since the founding of San Antonio in 1718. Tired of continuous warfare with neighboring tribes like the Comanche, Tejas, Tonkawas, and Bidais, the Lipan Apache made a pragmatic move. They proposed a peace treaty with the Spanish and even expressed a desire for their mission. For the Spanish, the Lipan Apache's overture presented an opportunity laden with strategic advantages. Eager to consolidate their foothold in Texas and guard against potential French encroachment, Spanish officials quickly agreed to the idea of forging peace with the Lipan Apache. Moreover, the discovery of silver deposits in the San Saba region added another layer of motivation. To facilitate this endeavor, mine owner Don Pedro de Terreros offered to finance the establishment of up to 20 missions over 3 years, aiming to pacify not only the Apache, but also other Plains tribes in the vicinity. His cousin, Fray Alonso Giraldo de Terreros, was appointed as the Father Superior of these missions. As early as 1725, Fray Francisco Hidalgo, a Franciscan friar, had sought permission to venture into Apache territory alone to spread Christianity among the tribes. However, his petition was denied. Despite this setback, after Hidalgo's death a year later, other Franciscan friars, such as Fathers Benito Fernandez de Santa Ana and Mariano Francisco de los Dolores y Viana, continued to advocate for the establishment of a mission for the Apaches. In 1757, their efforts finally became fruitful when the Spanish authorities approved the establishment of Mission Santa Cruz de San Saba. The mission aimed not only to convert the Apache people to Christianity, but also to promote peace and stability in the region by promoting better relations between the Spanish settlers and the indigenous tribes. During the summer and fall of 1757, people kept warning Terreros about a possible attack by the Nordos, their fierce enemies. Even the Apache passing through gave warnings. But Terreros didn't take them seriously. His priests heard stories about how brutal these attackers were, dressed in black with buffalo horns, riding powerful horses, and using long lances and fast arrows. But Terreros thought these were just exaggerated stories. He didn't think the Comanche, as history would call them, were a real threat. The Comanche weren't just any tribe. They were like a powerful empire, controlling vast areas of land in North America. So, when the San Saba mission was built, it made them very angry. Priests started leaving because they saw it was dangerous, and the soldiers at the nearby fortress got restless, sensing trouble was coming. In the days before, the mornings at the mission were calm, but despite the peaceful scenery, tensions were rising. 2 weeks earlier, almost all the horses were stolen, and the Apache allies fled. When soldiers went to get the horses back, they found out that the Comanche were everywhere and very angry. 2 weeks later, Father Terreros woke up to a terrifying sight. It was no ordinary morning. There was an eerie silence hanging in the air, and it wasn't long before he realized why. The storm he had been warned about had finally arrived from the north. When Father Terreros looked outside, he saw something chilling. 2,000 warriors on horseback approaching the mission. Most of them were Comanches, known for their short stature and stout build. They wore black, a color symbolizing death, and their horses looked rugged and untamed. Armed with muskets, bows, arrows, and lances, they were a formidable force. At first, there was a brief moment of false peace. The chief accepted greetings and gifts, but then suddenly, everything changed. The violence began swiftly. Father Terreros was shot. and the other priests met a similar fate. They were mercilessly killed, and their bodies mutilated. As fires raged and smoke filled the air, the mission descended into chaos. Blood stained the ground, and the once peaceful surroundings became a scene of horror and destruction. In the chaos of the attack, Padre Sant Sebastian, one of the few priests still alive, sought refuge in the mission chapel, hoping to protect the sacred tabernacle. But his efforts were in vain. He was brutally stabbed multiple times before his head was gruesomely severed with a Comanche hunting knife. The chapel, once a place where residents gathered peacefully for Holy Communion, was now a scene of horror, with blood and brain matter coating the floor. Amidst the carnage, a small group of 20 residents and one priest sought shelter in a nearby building, surrounded by death unfolding outside. The attackers spared nothing, slaughtering all the cattle and livestock and looting every building in sight. Meanwhile, from the safety of the Presidio, Colonel Tadia observed the onslaught. He dispatched a handful of soldiers to aid the mission, but kept the majority behind to protect the hundreds of women and children at the Presidio. The soldiers' attempt to reach the mission was met with immediate resistance. 2 were killed outright, and the rest were wounded by arrows and lances. Unable to penetrate the chaos, they hastily retreated to the safety of the Presidio, where they, along with the other inhabitants, watched helplessly as the destruction unfolded. For 3 agonizing days, they could only wait and watch as the mission, once a symbol of hope and faith, was reduced to rubble. In the aftermath of the attack, only a few managed to escape the gruesome fate that befell the San Saba mission. Huddled in a small building, they slipped away to the Presidio, leaving behind a horrific scene of carnage. 10 people, including 3 priests, were mercilessly slaughtered, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. The colonel, reeling from the devastation, urgently sought reinforcements and support to track down the attackers and seek retribution. However, his efforts were feeble and underfunded, no match for the elusive Noros who had unleashed such destruction. True to form, they vanished into the northern wilderness, leaving behind a trail of death and despair. A wealthy relative of the late Father Terreros sought to immortalize the tragedy in a haunting painting titled Massacre at the San Saba Mission. Completed in 1758, it stands as the oldest depiction of a historic event in Texas, a wild and bloody past. In 1598, Don Juan de Oñate, a Spanish explorer, led the charge in establishing New Mexico for Spain. This move was seen as a big leap in expanding Spanish territory, stretching across what seemed like endless miles to the Spaniards. But this expansion didn't come without its challenges. One of the biggest thorns on the side of the Spanish settlers was the Comanche people. These guys were not to be joked with. Skilled in warfare and mounted on horseback, they struck fear into the hearts of the Spanish in New Mexico. Their raids weren't just about winning battles. They aimed to capture people, whom they would then turn into slaves or absorb into their society. What made dealing with the Comanches even trickier was their way of life. They weren't a single unified group, but a bunch of autonomous bands, each with its agenda and leadership. This decentralized setup made it tough for the Spanish to negotiate or make peace with them. One showdown that stands out in history is the clash at Ojo Caliente. Over 100 Comanche warriors were charging in, ready to wreak havoc on the Spanish settlers. But guess what? The Spanish, well prepared and well trained, managed to hold their ground and fend off the attack. After the battle, the Spanish captured a Comanche survivor who spilled the beans about a rising star among the Comanches. This guy, Cuerno Verde, earned his stripes with bold moves and a fearless attitude. His green-painted buffalo horn headdress became a symbol of his leadership and bravery, making him a legend among his people. With Cuerno Verde in the mix, the Spanish had a new adversary to contend with. Cuerno Verde made a bold move with a formidable gang of 500 Comanche raiders to attack the Presidio. As he led his warriors in a relentless assault on the Presidio, Cuerno Verde's reputation as a skilled and fearless warrior was further solidified. The intensity of the battle reached its peak as Cuerno Verde led the charge. However, amidst the chaos of the battlefield, tragedy struck as Cuerno Verde fell victim to a Spanish bullet. His life extinguished in an instant. The collective cry of anguish from his warriors echoed through the air as they realized the loss of their esteemed leader. To the Comanche, the death of a war chief such as Cuerno Verde symbolized the loss of the spiritual power and protection that he wielded. With heavy hearts, the Comanches retreated from the battlefield, carrying the lifeless body of Cuerno Verde, his headrest still intact, as they mourned the passing of their beloved leader. Following the death of Cuerno Verde at the hands of the Spanish, the Comanches sought revenge for the loss of their revered leader. The mantle of leadership passed to Cuerno Verde's son, known as Cuano Verde, who was determined to avenge his father's death and restore honor to his family and clan. The Comanches employed their signature tactics of hit-and-run warfare, utilizing their superior knowledge of the terrain and their formidable skills as mounted warriors to outmaneuver and outwit their adversaries. They targeted Spanish supply lines, ambushed military patrols, and launched devastating raids on isolated settlements, inflicting heavy casualties and sowing chaos and destruction wherever they went. As the conflict between the Comanches and the Spanish continued to escalate, a new figure emerged on the scene called Juan Bautista de Anza. Appointed as governor of New Mexico in 1777, de Anza sought to bring an end to the violence and achieve peace between the two warring factions. De Anza introduced innovative strategies and tactics, leading the Spanish forces on a daring expedition to the Colorado Plains in a bid to surprise the Comanches. In a series of fierce clashes and skirmishes, the Spanish confronted the Cuerno Verde raiders, resulting in a decisive battle where Cuerno Verde's son, Cuano Verde, met his end at the hands of the Spanish forces. Juan Bautista de Anza claimed the headdress of Cuerno Verde as proof of his valor and achievement. His efforts ultimately led to the establishment of a durable Spanish-Comanche peace, allowing for peaceful trade and interaction between the two parties. His legacy endured, ensuring that his name would be remembered as a key figure in the history of Spanish colonization in the American Southwest. Jedediah Strong Smith's demise on his journey to Santa Fe at the hands of Comanche Indians on May 27, 1831, remains a deeply revered account, having occurred 185 years ago. Despite the passage of time, the circumstances surrounding this tragedy have remained unchallenged. The earliest records of Jedediah Smith's passing are found in two letters dated September 24, 1831, penned by Austin Smith, his brother. In the first letter from Austin Smith, written from Walnut Creek, east of present-day Great Bend, Kansas, during his return to St. Louis from Santa Fe, he informs his father, Jedediah Smith Sr., residing in Ashtabula, Cabers, Ohio, about the tragic incident. Your son Jedediah was killed on the 27th of May on his way to Santa Fe by the Comanche Indians. His party was in distress for water, and he had gone alone in search of the above river, which he found when he was attacked by 15 or 20 of them. They succeeded in alarming his animal, not daring to fire on him so long as they kept face to face. So as soon as his horse turned, they fired and wounded him in the shoulder. He then fired his gun and killed their head chief. It is supposed they then rushed upon him and dispatched him. Jedediah Smith, also known as Jedediah Strong Smith, was an American explorer born on January 6, 1799, in Bainbridge, New York. He ventured into the Wild West at a young age, likely making his first journey while still a teenager. In 1822, he joined a fur trading expedition to the Rocky Mountains, kicking off a decade-long career in the Rocky Mountain trade. One of Smith's notable achievements occurred in 1824 when he was part of a group that rediscovered the South Pass, a crucial passage through Wyoming leading to the Northwest. 2 years later, leading his own trading company, he started a daring journey from the Great Salt Lake, crossing the Mojave Desert to reach Southern California. This trek marked the first time Americans had entered California from the east. Encountering resistance from the skeptical Mexican governor of California, Smith adjusted his plans and headed north toward Oregon in 1827. However, he later diverted his route, making his way to the American River near Sacramento, California. Crossing the formidable Sierra Nevada mountains and traversing the desert, he achieved another historic feat, becoming the first American to return from California via an overland route to the Great Salt Lake. Jedediah Smith, realizing the perilous lack of water for both his men and pack animals, bravely set out alone to find the Cimarron River, located south of the caravan's path. Along his journey, Spanish traders warned him about the presence of 15 to 20 hostile Comanche Indians nearby. Despite the danger, Jedediah knew fleeing on his exhausted horse was futile. Instead, he valiantly approached the Comanche, hoping to negotiate safe passage to the river and back to his awaiting wagon train. Unfortunately, the Comanche, unwilling to let a single armed man pass peacefully and unable to confront him face to face, cunningly turned his horse, exposing Jedediah's vulnerable back. Shot in the shoulder, Jedediah turned to face his attackers, bravely dispatching their leader. Yet, outnumbered and overwhelmed by the remaining Indians, he met his end on that fateful day. The Comanche seized Jedediah's weapons, trading them with the indifferent Spanish traders who had watched the tragedy unfold. With callous disregard, they departed, leaving Jedediah's body to rest in the desert, mourned by all who heard the tragic tale of the courageous mountain man's demise. There are quite several other wars spearheaded by the Comanches that reeks of brutality. We'll look at these battles closely in Part 2. Kindly give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to get instant notifications of our new videos. Thanks for watching.